Explain to me, and to our audience, if you will, how you got from an architectural degree to Weird Al.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to prepare myself for my current line of work than getting an architecture degree. It was just one of those things. When I was 12 years old, I had a guidance counselor that talked me into becoming an architect. I had actually said that I would like to be a writer for Mad Magazine at the time. And my counselor said, yeah, I don't think, why don't you do something like an adult would do? Like, you're good at drafting, you're good at math. And I was talked into architecture. But I learned, I think my junior year in college, that it wasn't really my passion. It wasn't what excited me. Everybody else in my class was all, into the form following the function, and they just loved the whole business. And I just didn't have that fire in my belly for it. And it was kind of a scary time because I didn't know really what I was going to do with my life. I certainly didn't think I'd be able to make a living in show business. I played the accordion, for crying out loud. So unless I was going to be doing the bar mitzvah and wedding circuit for the rest of my life, I couldn't figure out exactly what I was going to do. But after graduating, I knocked on a few doors, and I tried to take advantage of the airplay I was getting on the Dr. Demento radio show, and luckily I was able to get a record deal. And against all odds, I'm still doing what I love to do.
It was what, the radio program?
The Dr. Demento show, he did a local version in Los Angeles, and he did a nationally syndicated version. And basically it was a radio show where he would play from his own extensive collection of comedy and novelty records. Everything, going back to the turn of the century. The people that inspired me from the show were people like Spike Jones, Alan Sherman, Stan Freberg, Tom Lehrer, people like that. And that really exposed me to a lot of things I'd never heard before. And that's what inspired me to start sending in tapes and to continue doing the kind of music that I do today.
And while you were oscillating from architecture to this, I'll call, crazy radio show, were your parents scratching their head and saying to themselves, what's happened to our son? He was good at math, he was good at science, he was terrific at school, he graduates at 16, he's valedictorian, we send him off to college, he's great at architecture, but he wants to do this crazy radio stuff.
If my parents were concerned or worried, they did a pretty good job of hiding it from me. I think they always knew that I had a pretty good head on my shoulders, and I wasn't impulsive, and I wasn't one of these kids that was going to run off to Hollywood and take my shot at stardom. That wasn't what I was all about. I always had a job. When I was trying to get a record deal, it was basically a minimum wage day job, but I always was pretty adult-minded, and I always made sure I could take care of myself. And my parents, as far as I knew, never really worried about me because they knew that somehow I would land on my feet. They said, you can come back home and live in the garage anytime you want.
Well, tell me what happened. You start sending tapes to the radio program, and then what happened?
Well, it took a few years, but I built up a cult following through the Dr. Demento show. Being on the Dr. Demento Funny 5 or Top 10 doesn't necessarily translate to a record deal. So
Funny 5 or Top 10?
At the end of every show, he would play the most requested songs of the night. For a while, it was the Funny 5, and then I think it was the Top 10. And a lot of times, my songs would be I'd have several songs on the countdown.
These are songs you were sending in to him on audio tape.
That's correct. So this is before I had a record deal. This is like, I think 1976 was the first time he played one of my recordings on the radio. And it was literally recorded on a cassette tape recorder in my bedroom, just me and the accordion. Very primitive. And he told me that the reason he played that particular recording was because I was a teenager with an accordion. He thought the song was okay, but it wasn't anything that special. But the fact that I was playing an accordion and obviously thinking I was cool, he thought that was pretty amusing.
So you do this for a while, and you're making some headway, developing a cult following. That developed into what?
Well, it took about 2 years between college and getting the first record deal. So I worked in a mailroom up until then. And we basically approached every single record label in town. And everybody said, oh, this is great, this is really clever and creative and brilliant and funny. We're not interested. Because it was basically novelty music. Anytime you're mixing comedy with pop music, it's considered novelty. That was at a point in time where people just didn't see the value in it. They thought it was basically the domain of one-hit wonders. It was a very ephemeral art form. Novelty artists have a habit of having a big hit and then disappearing quickly into obscurity. and they said, you know, we think you're great, but we want to have a roster of artists that have long careers. So I'm afraid we're not going to have to be able to work with you, which is the big irony of my my career, because I've now lasted 30 plus years, which is considerably longer than a lot of the people I was making fun of in the early days.